Good morning everyone. Today our group will be presenting to you about fraud research case of Toshiba Corporation. I'm introduce myself as first presenter Afrina binti Azman. First of all, what is accounting fraud? It is the deliberate manipulation of financial statements to create false appearance of corporate financial health in order to have an illusion of a company's wealth. It is also known as illegal alteration of companies' financial statements to misstate and hide profits or losses. The main actors who involved in the misleading investors and shareholders are employee, accountant, or the organization itself includes top management team. Therefore, the reason why an accounting fraud is existed related to overstating the revenue, avoiding debt obligations, unrecording expenses, and misusing assets and liabilities. The Enron scandal is one of the most famous examples of accounting fraud in history. We move to the next part, which is cook the book. Cook the book is used to explain that fraudulent activities are carried out by companies for falsifying their financial statements where they alter facts or figures on financial accounts dishonestly or illegally. More than that, it deliberately distorting, which involves manipulating financial accounts to avoid paying tax or hiding facts so that the company's situation looks better than the actual situation, and at the same time increase revenue, reduce expenses, and pump up profits. There are various ways through which cook the books can be done by the company. A company can manipulate by recording the lump sum payment received in financial year in which it is received, the services that will be provided also in coming financial years. For example, Company Cantik runs a business providing different services to customer. Then, it received 1 million ringgit in lump sum payments from Company Molek for providing services for the next 5 years, including current year. Company Cantik now includes the entire 1 million ringgit from Company Molek as income for current financial year only to increase its current profits instead of repaying it for duration of service contract, which is 20,000 ringgit in current year and 20,000 ringgit in the next 4 years each. The others manipulate of a company occur when financial statements with the help of balance sheet items. As an example, Company Cantik has created a separate subsidiary to bear such expenses, with the parent company refuses to disclose in its financial statement, and it may be a factor in the accounts book of such subsidiaries. If the subsidiary created is a separate legal entity that is not wholly owned by the parent company, then the company is not required to be recorded by the parent company in its financial statements. Hiding can be the same from investors.
Now I will talk about the content of Toshiba Corporation case. The fraud of Toshiba started in 2008 during the global financial crisis. The fraud has continued until it was exposed in 2015 when the Security and Exchange Surveillance Commission under the Financial Watchdog of Financial Service Agency launched a probe into Toshiba in relation on its project. Seeing the situation, Toshiba decided to set up an investigation. The investigation was handed to the Independent Investigation Committee, also known as IIC. After a few months of investigation, IIC reported that Toshiba has a series of inappropriate accounting series since 2008. IIC also found that the audited were insufficient as most of the evidence has been concealed by the manager and the CEO of the company. The auditor that audited the company did not raise the fraud that they have found. It found out that the company audit committee was headed by the former CFO of the company from 2011 until 2014. Later, the audit committee then succeeded by another former CFO of the company. The audit committee of the company has a limited knowledge of accounting and the staff under the audit committee possess adequate accounting expertise. Next, I will talk about perpetrated and concealed. The investigation found out there are direct evidence of inappropriate accounting practice in multiple Toshiba business units. There are three eras or generations of fraud which are accounting misconduct begin during Atsutoshi Nishida as CEO of Toshiba in 2008. That time, the world is having global financial crisis and has cut deeply into Toshiba profitability. Then, in 2009, Atsutoshi Nishida became the advisor of Norio Sasaki, the new CEO of the company. They continue to misconduct the fraud. Other than that, even a new CEO, Hisao Tanaka, was appointed in 2013. He continued the malpractice. The investigation found out evidence of 151.8 billion yen, equal to $1.2 billion overstated profit consists of booking future profit early, pushing back losses, pushing back charges, improperly value inventory. There are few fraud schemes that has been done by the company. The first fraud scheme is revenue fraud scheme. The most common technique used to fraudulently misstate the financial statement is improper revenue recognition. For example, one of Toshiba's subsidiaries did not record the increase of material costs because they don't want to reduce the selling price of the contract that worth 54.5 billion yen. The other method is through the channel stuffing their business. In this practice, the supplier will encourage the customer to buy more of the inventories, as it will increase their current period sale. Toshiba Corporation has inflating their revenue through the channel stuffing of its personal computer business. Carrying over is an unusual method of overstating sales. Using this method, the management can close the gap between the targeted and the actual sales so that the actual sales were equivalent to the targeted sales. By using this method, the gain of monthly profit will even exceed the sale of the month. Other method is by creating a false income. This is by reclassifying the contract loss as cost reduction measure to report profit. In this method, instead of the company record the contract loss, they actually will use the amount to reduce the contract cost so that the profit would be recorded. The second fraud scheme is expenses fraud scheme. The technique used is by understate the expenses in fraudulent financial statement. In this case, Toshiba has requested its vendor to delay the issuance of invoice until the next quarter. This will misrepresent the current period expenses. The last fraud scheme is current asset, that is inventories. The most common method to misstate financial statement is by overstating the asset. Compared to other method, this method is hard to stop. This is because when the company overstates its closing inventories, it will cost overstated for the beginning inventory for the next period and will cause the net income to be understated. Next is the whistleblower. Before I talk about whistleblower, I will talk about Japan's whistleblower protection law. The purpose of this act is to protect the whistleblower to provide for the cancellation and other dismissal of the whistleblower on the ground of disclosure of information and the step to be taken by business, operator and administrative organization on whistleblowing and to promote compliance with law and regulation regarding the protection of life, body, property and other instead of citizen, thus to contribute strengthen of the general welfare of people's life and the development of socio-economic sound. For example, effort to establish a whistleblower system in smaller business and raise public awareness of whistleblower rights and protection have been inadequate. Moreover, the scope of the Act, including the definition of whistleblower, is considered too narrow. The newly approved amendments are intended to resolve certain issues. However, several other issues, including the lack of criminal penalties for companies responding to whistleblowers and the absence of program reward, remain unresolved by the amendment. These amendments strengthen the protection of Japanese whistleblowers but still do not comply with strong legal whistleblowers in other countries. Significantly, the amendment failed to impose criminal penalty against companies on whistleblowers. In addition, whistleblowers who can prove in court that they have been fired because the notification of information is only entitled to return. From this case, we can recognize and conclude that the Act of Whistleblower Protection Law of Japan is protecting the identity and information about the whistleblower.
Toshiba Corporation case, the pressures, opportunities and rationalization of perpetrating the fraud. Pre-fraud period. The sudden drop that happened in 2004, the percentage of change in sales increased in a significant amount. For that, in the annual report 2004, the Toshiba's director, president and chief executive officer reports that the net sales had declined by a margin of 1%. This assurance without a doubt created pressure for the top executives to improve their sales performance. In fact, after the decline in 2004, the sales then increased by 4.6% in 2005, 8.7% in 2006, and 12.2% in 2007, which definitely an increase of more than 4% each year before it fell by 7.8% in 2008. Although the continuing increasing trend did not have triggered the auditors when performing analytical procedures, instead it could have been treated as business as usual. But the steady increase in percentage, which seemed to be too smooth, and the constant of 4% increase from the forecasted 2% would require further proof. In 2004, the operating net income raised by 51% as compared to previous year. However, Mr. Okamura and Mr. Nishida had admitted in their 2008 annual report that the consolidated operating income and consolidated net income had decreased by 20 billion yen. Upon the failure in fulfilling to the previous target, this statement revealed even greater targets to be achieved, thus created pressure. The new targets and the failure in meeting the other targets in the past might just create a further pressure on the top executives, and this knowledge would normally have its attraction to the auditors when performing the audits for next year. In 2009, the operating income declined by 232%, further declined by 95% in 2010, and was reduced further by 1,506.95% in 2011. These circumstances definitely heightened the pressure to turn the business performance around. The total sales and pre-tax income were overstated by 4 and 28.2 billion yen respectively. Though the analysis from 2002 to 2008, it showed significant changes as shown in Figure 1 and Figure 2. The auditor could still have been alerted by the constant pressures which been faced by the top executives and the continuous assurance that they had to give to the shareholders to convince them that Toshiba would be able to meet the targets as reported in the annual reports. Toshiba had overstated its sales by 10.5 billion yen and its pre-tax income by 123.6 billion yen in the 2015 IAC report. This analyzed the pressure that the company was facing in Toshiba in meeting its targets. The replacement of the president and top executives, unfavorable economic conditions, and the DA results all indicated that fraud could possibly be perpetrated. Based on key fraud schemes, planning a deception which took part of the management as the decision maker would have been strategic in deciding what is to be hidden and what is to be shown in the financial statements. The fraud element triangle was introduced in addition to the fraud motivation triangle. By this, the former focuses on perceived pressures, perceived opportunities, or rationalizations, while the latter emphasizes investigative methods of thief acts and conversion. It has been proven that a fraud activity can be quite difficult to detect because it is often involves secrets through falsification of documents or collusion among management, employees, or third parties. This excessive pressure that was building in Toshiba also was due to overly optimistic messages made by the chairman and president to the shareholders in the annual reports, even after unfavorable financial performance was reported, especially in 2009. The behavior of optimistic messages was then passed on to the operating personnel to meet sales targets. Those bossy top executives persistently demanded the subsidiaries' management to achieve beyond the subsidiaries' capability, so they had to resort to unusual fraud schemes such as negative cost of goods manufactured to make the gross profit become positive. The top executives were aware of the inappropriate accounting treatments and financial statements misstatements, but neither was stopped nor given approval for certain adjustments. Moreover, permitting the fraudulent schemes to be perpetrated collectively and systematically by subsidiaries and corporate office. While in terms of opportunity, the senior top executives' blessing allowed for the internal control system to be set aside, making it ineffective. Based from this, any sort of abnormal duplications and irregularities could be identified for further investigation, especially in cases where trend analysis does not even show any irregularities throughout the motives, opportunity, and rationalization aspects of Toshiba fraud. It can be claimed to be not surprising.
The consequences and penalty imposed for Toshiba Corporation case. First, auditors. After Financial Services Agency (FSA) issued an order to increase its business, Ernst & Young Shin Nihon announced the resignation of company CEO and Chairman Koichi Hanabusa, and monthly salaries for 19 employees were cut from 20% to 50%. FSA also named 7 accountants involved in the audit who illegally failed to be prudent and signed false financial documents. It mentioned that the auditing firm's operations were deeply improper, which is it failed to audit its clients' book with a critical viewpoint. The FSA fine Ernst Young Shin Nihon amounted to 2.1 billion, which is 17.4 million, and suspended it from taking a new 3-month contract from January. Second, the chairman of company. Toshiba chairman Shigenori Shiga had resigned from the organization. However, he remained a Toshiba executive until June, when a general shareholders meeting will be held in order to focus on solving problems related to Westinghouse, which is an American-based nuclear developer owned by Toshiba. Research and scrutiny will be held on other executives of Toshiba because of the poor financial and business results over the years. Then the company. Toshiba shows poor performance in television, household appliances, and personal computer business. The company also lost about 8 billion of market value, with a loss amounted to 4.6 billion annually at the end of 2015. From that, Toshiba Corporation was removed from the stock index as highlighting Japan's best companies, and in the following months, the company's stock fell to its lowest point in 2.5 years, with a net loss amounted to 102 million for the quarter period.
Next, the consequences for management. Toshiba has filed a lawsuit against some of the top management members involved in fraud. Although initially expected about 10 executives will be prosecuted, In fact, the case against 3 previous presidents and also 2 chief financial officers, it caused damage to the company due to failure fulfill their obligation to conduct accounting work with due care. The FSA fined Toshiba amounted to 7.4 billion and had intention to raise the lawsuit's compensation demand to 3.2 billion on the greater cost of damage. It added 2.6 billion from this amount fined for compensation claim. Moreover, it had to pay additional payment of 2.1 billion to its auditor Ernst & Young Shin Nihon for the altered work of past earnings report. Next, consequences for shareholders. Following the scandal, 50 individual shareholders of Toshiba Corporation sued a Japanese conglomerate in Tokyo, seeking compensation of 301.99 million after the company's shares fell over a multi-billion dollar. At a press conference, President Tanaka apologized for the scandal and offered his apology to all Toshiba's shareholders and stakeholders. The scandal in Toshiba has clearly dropped the shareholders' confidence to make an investment. They will having a hard time to find new shareholders as the company has involved in such scandal that could affect their return in the future. At a press conference, President Tanaka apologized for the scandal and fielded questions and offered his apology to all Toshiba shareholders. The last consequences is for corporate governance. While Toshiba is actively implementing corporate governance practices, investigations have found that the company was involved in fraudulent accounting. Cheating in Toshiba accounting has eroded confidence in the Japanese stock and affect to all other Japanese corporate companies. Unlike scandals that performed by a single person or specific group which might be treated as isolated incidents, this will give a lesson to all corporate governance so that any inappropriate and irregularities of company would not happen again in the future. To earn back the trust, Toshiba needs to innovate in action, not just in words. Thus, top management is responsible to ensure such governance can be effectively implemented. In conclusion, this case shows that the accounting scandal in company Toshiba happened because of the perception of corporate governance in Japan is still not as strong as expected. It seems that this scandal happened not because personal greed. Instead, it was driven by the desire of executives to protect the image of the company. The problem happened because of senior employees had been encouraged to achieve operating results that seemingly impossible to attain. Clearly, we can see that the fraudulent activities occurred in the company Toshiba had brought so much impact to every individual engaged in the scandal. As the company's governance seems to not have been implemented properly, the company should hire people who can withstand the pressure that comes from executives. In my opinion, top management should play an important role in the company to ensure the governance was properly done without involving in any fraudulent activities. The auditors also should ensure that they are fully aware and take relevant steps to comply with the policies and regulations required, as for auditing process should be done truthfully and faithfully. Last but not least, everybody in the firm should know that the cost of trying to prevent fraud is less expensive to a business than the cost of the fraud that gets committed.